What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This is episode number 289. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources. Joining me on the line, fresh off of Magic TV, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, how goes?
This is going pretty well.
You've been a busy boy lately. I watched the Standard Super League, and you had just gotten back from the GP, and I'm sure you've doing your normal videos and articles and all that kind of stuff too. How are you holding up?
I'm doing all right. I'm actually not going to Grand Prix Providence this weekend. I found that going to too many events in a row is what leads to burnout, whereas having a weekend off where I don't really have to do anything is really good. And there's like just having those couple days to recharge makes it so I can keep doing all the stuff and going to all these things.
Okay, well, that's a smart choice. I am going out to Providence, but I didn't go to Charlotte, so I kind of had that weekend already, so can see that. Before we get into our main topic and also our special guest, who I'll be introducing in a moment here, I want to mention our sponsor, channelfireball.com. They are the place to go for a whole lot of things. The stuff that always jumps to mind for me is the free content, right? You get articles, videos, podcasts by some of the best players in the world, and with a similar goal to what we have here on Limited Resources, getting you better at Magic. Now, there's also opinion pieces and other stuff in there too, but the majority of the content is there to help you improve at Magic, and that's something that's near and dear to my heart. It's why I do this podcast, and I love all the content that you can get for absolutely free on Channel Fireball. While you're there, you know, if you need to fill out the last few cards in your commander deck or maybe your standard deck, you want to buy some sealed products so that you can have a draft with your friends, you can find all of that at Channel Fireball as well. This coming weekend, question mark, is Copenhagen? Is it 2 weeks or is it this weekend, Luis?
It's this weekend. It's 2 days from now, something like that. Starts this Friday, and we've got a bunch of people over there. I'm not one of them this time. I went to Liverpool, but Copenhagen was a bridge too far for me. So I hope everyone who wants to make it out can make it out, because it's going to be an awesome event. Yeah,
there's a lot of Channel Fireball pros that have made the trip as well. They're going to be doing some special presentations, and of course, just being there is cool. You can have them sign your playmat or just say hi to them. So make sure you check that out if you do go to GP Copenhagen. Before we get into our special guest for the week, I do have an announcement regarding the Patreon. We've got our Patreon winner for the month. We've been doing this for the last 3 months now, I guess, where basically if you're a member of the Patreon, which is, of course, another way that you can support the show directly, you go to patreon.com/limitedresources, and you can set how much you want to give per episode. It's really easy to do, and you can set any amount you want. Really, any amount works. If you found the show helpful to you, entertaining, informative, if it's helped you win some extra booster packs or improve your game, and you want to give back, you can. You get a thank you card and a sticker for doing it. And also you get entered in a lot of extra kind of cool stuff. And this is one of them, the Patreon giveaway every month. And this month's winner is Kevin Mace. So Kevin, congratulations. You've won an LR gift pack that is going to get you this month. It will include, I've got it in front of me here, ready to go, a couple of packages of Limited Resources sleeves. You get an LR sticker and a button. You also get a Limited Resources t-shirt, which means, of course, Kevin, you're going to have to send me an email, lr@lrcast, to let me know what size you would like for that. And you also get the rares from the Crack-A-Packs that we've done for that month. And I've got those sitting in front of me as well. And so I'll send that out to Kevin once it's done. If you want to get in on the action too, you can head over to Patreon and find that. Okay. Before we do our Crack-A-Pack and our Patreon question of the week, I thought I'd bring in our special guest. That way he can help us with the Crack-A-Pack and the Patreon question of the week, and then we'll transition nicely right into our main topic, which is, well, an interview with him. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome a Platinum Pro, a Pro Tour Top 8er, a limited specialist from Florida. The Gator Mage is here, Chris Fennell. Chris, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, Marshall. Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, you know, we've been talking about getting you on the show for a little while now, and I'm pretty happy that we finally have been able to sync up our schedules. You and I travel in the same circles, it turns out, and we bumped into each other in Vegas a whole bunch of times when we were able to finally hammer out a day when we could get you on the show, and I'm excited to have you on.
I'm glad to be here. I'm a big fan of the show, and I'm excited. So.
All right. So what we're going to do now, Chris, is we're going to do an interview with you But we've got a couple of things that we do on the show every week that I thought it would be fun to bring you in on. So the first one is our Patreon question of the week. I just mentioned about the Patreon, and one of the cool bonuses you get is you get a chance to submit questions, and we pick one of them for every week. This one's from Brian Howard, and it says, worst case scenario, you drafted a bad deck or opened a bad sealed pool. What are some build strategies and play strategies you can use to mitigate the damage of things like no on-color bombs, little or no removal, and mediocre to bad playables? Do you just cram in your best cards and hope for the best, or are there opportunities you can look for when having a train wreck pool? Chris, why don't you start us off? Is there anything that jumps to mind for you? You know, you travel out to a GP. I know how much you love Limited, Chris, and you're very proficient at it as well. You sit down, you open your pool, and it's kind of a stinker. There's not a whole lot there. Is there any way that you know of to get any extra edge, or do you really just put your best cards in it and kind of keep your fingers crossed?
I certainly do not just put my best cards in and keep my fingers crossed. In fact, I think that's a common mistake when it comes to sealed deck building. Like my deck actually recently in GP Atlantic City that I went 9-0 with was probably a 4 out of 10. I think what you want to do in situations like that is you want to make sure that you're doing something productive on every turn of the game. And try to build your sealed deck maybe a little bit more like a draft deck with just worse cards. So like maybe you want to like keep cards that are cheap and interact, cards that you can buy games with, cards that people will play poorly around, and make sure that you're doing something productive on every turn. The strategy of just jamming a bunch of good cards in a deck and hoping that you're going to win, I don't find to be very productive, especially when you open your pool and you know your pool isn't good to begin with. So basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to play for a late game and play all of your best cards against a bunch of people that are also doing that strategy with better cards and better mana. So, for example, in Atlantic City, I played a blue-black deck splashing white, and my deck was very mediocre. I had 2 monuments, but I had lots of cheap ways to interact, and I was very good in the early game. I drew first every round. I had lots of productive things to do throughout the course of the game, and I was good at breaking up opposing strategies. And I just grinded and played well and was able to go 9-0 there. So I think that the most important thing is just make sure that you can do something productive throughout the game. Playing a lot of expensive cards because they're more powerful is just not a way to win. A lot of times people will have powerful cards and they'll have a good curve. So they'll be ahead of you, and then they'll be able to either kill or bounce your thing and continue to attack you. So that would be my overall strategy in those situations. Build a slightly less powerful deck, but build it with a decent curve and good, cheap ways to interact and see if you can push through enough damage. Also, if your mana's not great, I strongly recommend drawing first and sealed. A lot of times you'll pick up free wins because people will take a turn off because they miss a land drop. Something like that. I've 9-0'd the last 2 sealed decks, Atlantic City and Vegas, and I drew first every single game that I had the choice. So,
wow, which is probably every single game, basically, right? I mean, or every single match, because if you lose the roll, most people will play first for you anyway.
Well, I played Luis on day 1, and he got wise to it and drew first in game 2.
He next leveled you.
But
it is very deck dependent. But yeah, I tend to agree with you.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Louisa, for the rare times for you when you don't open up Mizium Mortars and Pack Rat, how do you cope with the with the mediocre pool?
Well, I actually kind of mentioned this when we were talking about Grand Prix Vegas, because I completely agree with Chris. My deck in Vegas, like I said, was a deck full of pretty mediocre cards. And if you build the control deck with mediocre cards, you get completely blanked by the better control decks because the game's going to go long. You're both going to be able to cast your spells, and their spells are better than yours. Whereas if you build an aggro deck, a bad aggro deck and a good aggro deck don't always look that different because, yes, a 2-mana 2/2 with a good ability is better than a 2-mana 2/2 with a bad ability, but a 2-mana 2/2 mostly is just a 2-mana 2/2. There's not a big difference between those things. And you can build an aggro deck, say, with not much removal and be fine, whereas if you build a control deck with no removal, they're going to have time to play their 6 or 7 drop. You're going to need to kill it. You're not going to be able to. So right. I tend to kind of fall on the same side as Chris, where, look, I don't want to be building these aggro decks in sealed. We talked about how that's not like the best place to start, but the worse your pool is, the more likely you need to do stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay. Why don't we move on to our Crack-a-Pack? I've got a Modern Masters 2015 Crack-a-Pack here. Yeah. Yeah, the worst cracking sounds ever come from Modern Masters. No smells, no nothing.
Your zip a pack.
Yeah, unzip a pack.
Unfold a pack.
Yeah. All right, so first card out. Not a bad one. It's Smoke Braider. So that's, of course, the one in a red for a 1/1, and it taps to add 2 mana that you can use for elemental spells or abilities. Any color. Guy's okay, right? I mean, if you're going to play the Elementals deck, there's 2 really important cards, right? There's this one, the Smoke Braider, and there's the Incandescent Soulstoke, and they are important for the deck. It's a bold move, though, to take Smoke Braider first and just, plant your flag in the Elemental territory, I think.
Yeah, Chris, I don't know how much you like the Elemental deck. I don't love it enough. Well, first of all, I wouldn't want to first pick Smoke Braider regardless, but I don't actually love the Elemental deck that much to begin with, though I know Ben S likes it a lot.
Yeah, Ben likes it quite a bit. What do you think about it, Chris?
I actually think that the expensive cards are the more important cards in the Elemental deck. As far as overall quality of the deck, if it comes together, it's very good. If it doesn't, it's near unplayable. Also, a lot of your best cards are high picks in other decks, like Burst Lightning and Lightning Bolt and those types of cards. So you're fighting pretty hard for those. I don't love the Elemental deck. Usually I back into it as opposed to going gung-ho, like with the Smoke Braider first. But I think that the most important thing about the Elemental deck is to take the expensive elementals like Aether Snipe, maybe a Thunderblast or the expensive ones, and then table the Smoke Braiders. Because if you take a bunch of Smoke Braiders and all your elementals cost 3 mana, that's not really that productive other than trying to combo them through getting them all out at once and then making a bunch of mana. So typically I wouldn't take a Smoke Braider early in a pack at all. So
yeah, I wouldn't either. I've been playing a lot of Modern Masters online, and I've been playing a fair bit of sort of green based multicolored decks, 4 colors, 5 colors, something like that. And a card like Aether Snipe is fairly high in my radar for a deck like that that's playing rampant growth effects and can power out an Aether Snipe in the mid to late game to help stabilize the board and deal with the threat. And I feel like I'm just taking those from the Elemental player. So next card is Mana Leak, which seems fine. I mean, this isn't great, right?
Mana Leak's a fine card. It's early interaction, but the fact that it's just so bad in the late game and against people who know what they're doing. I played multiple matches against people where once I see Mana Leak, I just wait till I have 5 or 6 mana to play my 2 or 3 drop when they're, assuming that they have left mana up. It's just so easy to play around Mana Leak.
Yeah, it is. It's actually, I typically, if I cast Mana Leaks in game 1, if I can, I just board them out in game 2 for more proactive spells for that reason. Because you can basically get the same effect of having the card without having it. I don't think it's very good, but sometimes you have a little bit slower deck, and Mana Leak can help you develop. Sometimes, Rashad and Port you for 3 turns is totally worth it if your deck is very rewarding in the late game. So in decks like that, I'll keep it in and I'll play it, but I'm never really looking for it. It also doesn't really put you in a deck or have a deck. And I think that with Modern Masters, it's very important to try to stake your claim to one of the archetypes, because if you get past that archetype, your deck will be incredibly strong.
Yeah, I agree. And also, I've just found that the overall card quality seems to be high enough in this set that cards like Mana Leak often get pushed out for just more reliably proactive things, actual removal spells, stuff like that. Ghostly Changeling is next. Meh. Helium Squirter is next, which is quickly becoming the card that I don't like very much, but tend to lose to too often because they can send too many things to the skies. I still have only played it a few times and never really been that impressed by it, but it does have that niche ability that, you can get to the extreme late game and send in, 2 threats up to the skies and kind of close out a game. But yeah, not worth picking up here, right?
I've been very impressed with it in original Ravnica when it was printed. However, when it came back, it's somehow completely underwhelming. The cards are so powerful, and its power and toughness to casting cost ratio is so bad. In order for this card to be good, you have to have sufficient creatures on the ground with counters, and or creatures in your hand that you're going to play after it with counters. They have to not have a 3-point removal spell, which all of the removal in the format is 3 damage. Sunlance, Nameless Inversion, Lightning Bolt, and there's one more that I'm forgetting off the top of my head. And so this card is just not very good in this format.
Yeah. Next is Sunspear Shikari. Luis, I know that was one that had moved up a little bit for you as one of the better cards for this red-white equipment deck, if that's where you end up going.
Right. I think Sunspear Shikari is better than I initially thought it was, but it's still not a card I'm really happy to first pick.
Yeah.
First of all, I don't like taking cards that are this linear that, go in basically just one deck anyway, and this card's power level isn't high enough that I'd really ever be happy selecting this first. That being said, it is a good card in the red-white deck or the Affinity deck that has, the Darksteel Axe and Cranial Plating, that sort of thing. But in general, Sunspear Shikari is definitely not a first pick.
You agree with that, Chris?
Yeah, I'm never first picking it.
Yeah, me neither. Bloodthrown Vampire is next. Another medium card. There is a green-black sacrifice deck, though. Interestingly, I found that Bloodthrown Vampire isn't necessarily a critical part of it. It is a card you can play in the deck, and I found it to be okay. But you don't need it. I don't know. It to me, it hasn't performed at a level that's made me feel like I need to prioritize it really in any way.
I think it's actively bad.
You just think it's terrible?
I wouldn't say terrible, but I think it's actively bad.
Yeah.
I think it's like a 10th pick or later. There are decks where you can play it, but typically when you have enough creatures that you're able to sacrifice and make this guy large, there's better things to be doing with them. Also, like Reassembling Skeleton with this guy is a combo, but then you're playing both this card and Reassembling Skeleton in your Modern Masters deck. So...
No, I agree. And of course the problem being that you draw one or the other and they're both super mediocre compared to like the average card quality in the set. If you get both of them, it can be pretty good, but yeah, no, I'm with you. We've talked about that on the show a lot of times in the past about, not falling for the trap of trying to draft two bad-ish cards to make one good card or one good combo. And I think that this is pretty much the definition of that.
Yeah, if you're going to draft two badish cards to make one good combo, make sure the combo is really, really good.
Yeah, just insane.
Like Hiki Jiki Pestermite.
Yeah.
Yeah,
those two are worth
one in a black, get +2/+2. That's a great combo.
But you can do it more times, Luis, and the first one's free.
I was like, with some work, you can build a slightly better Ghostly Changing. That's true. That's a good point.
Yeah. Thrive is next. Another card that I just have yet to find a home for. I haven't taken it early or at all, and even though I play quite a few green decks, and even some of them that make a bunch of tokens, I still end up not playing Thrive.
Agree. I almost never play it. There are times when it is correct to play it in the green-white deck when you get insufficient Sigil Blessings or Overwhelms or Elish Norn or whatever, any way to pump your guys. So there are times where you just have a lot of ways to manufacture creatures and not a lot of ways to utilize them. So I've seen Seth Manfield play it a few times to reasonable success in decks like that where he just couldn't get the Sigil Blessings and stuff. But then it's very much replacement level. It is in fact the replacement. It's definitely a bench warmer, hopefully. And if you you don't get the first teamers, then you put this guy in because you need somebody to run the team.
Yeah. This is the Matthew Dellavedova of Modern Masters. Blades of Velasvel is next. That's, of course, the 1 in a red tribal instant shapeshifter. And basically you can give 2 creatures +2/+0 until end of turn. An aggressive card, but again, another one that just seems, at least for me, to fall below the threshold of playability. It, again, just doesn't quite do enough. I mean, I could see this being okay in the double strike deck, like giving 2 different double strikers +2/+0 could end a game. I have certainly lost a game to Blades of Velasvel, but when I'm building my deck, this is usually one that ends up on the sidelines. I rarely actually include it.
Yeah. Go ahead, Luis. Sorry.
I've just never cast this card, and I hope I never have to.
I will certainly say this is a card that I will lose to exponentially more than I ever win with it because I, like Luis, will never cast it. It is below replacement level in the red-white deck. There are sufficient pump spells. There's Mighty Leap. There is Brute Force, both of which have a little more flexibility. There's also all the cards you actively want, which are the equipments. I think I'd likely play a Goblin War Paint over this card in a double strike deck. it's pretty actively bad. Plus, if you draft Goblin Warpaint, you have the opportunity to play Daybreak Coronet. So just throwing that out there.
It's one of 2 auras though that you do. Splinter Twin, I think, is the other one.
Yep, those are the only 2.
I guess you could put a Pillory of the Sleepless and Daybreak Coronet on your creature, but that's not.
That is a combo.
And it's funny. So we're probably going to talk later about this, about how Chris is someone who tends to play, somewhat offbeat or unconventional cards. The fact that he's not even willing to touch Blades of Belazil means it's really bad.
There you go. Next card is Sphere of the Suns. This is the 2-mana artifact that enters the battlefield tapped with 3 charge counters on it. And you can tap it and remove a charge counter to make any color of mana. So you get to use it 3 times. When I first saw the spoiler and I saw that, we could do these sort of 5-color decks, I thought that Sphere of the Suns would be something I'd be seeing quite a bit. As it turns out, it is a significant step below what you really want, which are Wayfarer's Baubles and Rampant Growths for that type of effect. I really try not to run Sphere of the Suns whenever I can, and I'm usually successful at not having to run one. The times when I do, I feel a little sad. It's not that the card's awful. It's just that it isn't as good as the things around it, and that makes it, borderline unplayable for me.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree, and I'm glad that this card was in the pack because I've actually had a discussion about this card. The only way that this card should make your deck is if your multicolored 4 and 5 drops are so good that it's worth mulliganing for. And I think that the 5-color decks at their best are often land type dependent as well as color dependent, in which case you're sacrificing your ability to search up additional land types to create an additional colored mana. Now, there are going to be decks where this card is good. Say you get 2 Etched Oracle. If you get a bunch of Sunburst specifically, like multiple Etched Oracles, Skyreach Mantas, then sure, playing a 5/5 Skyreach Manta on turn 4 is worth mulliganing for. But if your deck is not worth mulliganing to get 5 mana, you should not play this card. And I actively try not to draft it because I might play it if I draft it. So that's basically where I stand.
That's pretty good. You hold yourself back by just not drafting it. I like it.
Yeah, you can end up with a 5-color deck that has awesome spells, and you just were taking too many awesome spells over fixing, or you got cut off of baubles, and then Sphere is plausible. But honestly, the only deck I've ever liked this in is in the Affinity deck that has multiple colors, not a lot of lands, and really wants artifacts. But in general, yeah, Sphere of the Sun's not really a card I want.
Yeah, which again, it kind of surprised me. I thought we'd be playing it more actively, but it turns out when they put the mana fixing that they put in, this one just ends up on the bottom of that pile. Our last regular common, Ulamog's Crusher. This, of course, is the 8-mana 8/8 that must attack each turn and has Annihilator 2. It's funny when I've been drafting this 4 or 5 color rampish deck. You need finishers in it, right? You want to have 2 to 3 big finishers to really kind of clean up after you've stabilized the board. And I found that Ulamog's Crusher is my backup plan. It's the one that I will go to if I just didn't happen to get any big rares or whatever. Even like something like a Palaka Worm, which is what I'd prefer to get, or another big Eldrazi or an Apocalypse Hydra, something huge to finish off the game, Karn, whatever. Sometimes those don't come to you. You just don't open them or they don't get past you. And I found that Ulamog's Crusher is a serviceable backup plan, but that is where I have the card. It's in backup plan mode. It's pretty easy to pick one of these up if you want it. And I kind of use it as my insurance against not finding, an air quotes real finisher. Where are you guys at on the Crusher? We'll start with you, Chris.
I think there are decks where it's really good, and those are the decks where like you have multiple Kozilek's Predator, because playing him on turn 6 is pretty devastating. Playing him on turn 8 is rarely influential, and he's also unplayable against certain decks. Like he's almost unplayable against multiple Waxmane Bakus and stuff like that, where you're just going to spend 8 mana on a spell that they can pay 1 to tap. Also with Blinding Soul Eater, same kind of deal. So. I definitely agree with you, Marshall. I'll play the card if I need a finisher. Hopefully I don't need a finisher. Also, a lot of times this guy wants to be in like a 5-color deck, and all your cards are finishers in the 5-color deck because all your Rioters are 5/5s, your Mantas are 5/5s. So rarely do you need them.
What about you,
Good,
Luis?
he's really good.
What about you, Luis? Ulamog's Crusher.
I do agree with the basic sentiment Chris is saying, which is Ulamog's Crusher is not a great finisher, but will finish games.
Yeah. All right, we've got one more comment. It's our foil. It's Blood Ogre, a card I remember being really good in M12, but has taken a step down here, I think, in Modern Masters. Again, probably a victim of the fact that, well, there's a lot of really powerful strategies and cards floating around here. And also what you mentioned earlier, Chris, the fact that it's got 3 toughness at its best. It's the 2 and a red 2/2 with first strike with Bloodthirst 1. I mean, it's a good card. Like, by most, limited measuring sticks, Blood Ogre holds up just fine. But I have found that while playable, it's not a card that I'm interested in this format. Chris, Blood Ogre, what are your thoughts on that guy?
I do like Blood Ogre, but I also am not actively taking him very highly. I don't think that I really want to be the aggressive red deck where I get fire slingers and I'm pinging and trying to Blood Ogre people. I think that when I get that deck, it's because red is very open and I just moved in because that's what I'm supposed to be doing. So I would not take this card particularly highly. I do think he is very good at fighting for his casting cost. So if you have other cards, if your other cards are more important than him, then he's very good. Like, he's a very good late pick, because if people are having to use their lightning bolts and sun lances and arrest and cards like that on this guy, then you're more powerful. Your bombs, your super good cards are going to be able to come through and attack. So I do like this card, but I would not first pick it or even close. Probably.
Yeah, but I like what you said. Picking it up late does make sense. It's an efficient card still. It's just not an early one. All right, moving on to the uncommons. Our first one, well, not that exciting. It's Expedition Map. Artifact for colorless, and you can pay 2 colorless, tap it and sack it to search your library for a land card, reveal it, and put it in your hand. This just doesn't fill the same role as Rampant Growths and Wayfarer's Baubles or even the stupid Sphere of the Suns that we talked about. I have yet to play an Expedition Map, and I don't think I will for the duration of the format. It feels like one of those cards that they just wanted to get into circulation, but I don't think it has much of a home, in limited here.
I do agree with you. I could see myself playing it in a 5-color deck only if I needed access to 2 additional colors and I had bounce lands of those colors. Mm-hmm. So I could save myself the trouble of having to play like an extra mountain. And like, let's say I had 2 blue-black bounce lands. I may play this so I don't have to play an island in the swamp. I could just search it up and then get both for 1. But that's an extremely niche scenario. I haven't played it. I don't even think I've had it. Which means somebody hedged earlier than I did. So.
Yeah, and it's an uncommon. You don't see them that often. Ooh, here's some business. Palaka Worm.
Laka.
Yeah. So we talked about this one, I think, last week, but this is one of my favorite finishers. What a beautiful card. It's 7 mana for a 7/7 trample. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 7 life, and when it dies, you draw a card. It's just every aspect of it is exactly what you want, except for one thing. It costs 4 green. So, if you are heavily invested in a 4 or 5 color deck, it can be a problem to get Palaka Worm down, even though these decks are often base green. You can still find yourself with just like 2 green mana. From my experience, though, Palaka Worm deserves the spot and I'll even warp my mana base a little bit to make sure that I can cast it, and it doesn't let me down. I think this card is better than some of the rares in the set, and just one of the best finishers you can get.
Yeah, it's a slam first pick, especially in this pack. I was hoping there would be a card like this in the pack because I really didn't want to first pick any of those commons.
Yeah, me too. This is certainly my number one on a rocket ship. You too, Luis? Palaka Worm?
Yeah, for sure. When you have a 7-drop that can actually keep you alive when you cast it and provide a good value against removal, I mean, that really is the most you can ask for out of a 7-drop.
Yeah, it's really one of the best 7s they've made, and it's an uncommon. It's insane. I mean, this card could be rare and you wouldn't blink. It's that good. Next is Glass Dust Hulk, which is 3 blue-white for a 3/4. It's got cycling for blue or white, so you can just pay a blue or white mana, get it in your hand, and draw a card. And whenever another artifact enters, it's an artifact, by the way, artifact creature. Whenever another artifact enters the battlefield under your control, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn, and it gets can't be blocked until end of turn. So, if you happen to be in the blue-white artifact deck, this card's great. I mean, this card is a finisher. It cycles early so that you can make some keeps you wouldn't necessarily be able to normally, and it cycles for very cheap. Again, just either a white or a blue mana. And then, like I said, I mean, here a sequence that I described on the show a couple of weeks ago that happens is they play Glass Dust Hulk and you feel like you're pretty well stabilized, and then they play like an equipment. Now, when I was playing it, it was a cranial plating, but even just anything, they play the equipment, this thing gets to trigger, it becomes a 4/5 unblockable, they equip it, and then they hit you. And they're hitting you for 6 or 8, or even in my case, it was 12, and this thing can really punch through in the late game. It's also not too bad at a 3/4 for 5. Chris, you mentioned earlier that a lot of the removal tends to be able to kill 3 toughness creatures, and the Glass Dust Hulk, dodges that pretty nicely.
Yeah, it's a little bit prohibitive to cast only because in those artifact decks you want to have you usually have 1 or 2 citadels and probably 15 or 16 lands.
Yeah, it's your curve topper for sure.
The fact that it cycles does mitigate that, although that can lead to interesting keeps because you either keep a landlight hand needing it to be a land or a spell-light hand needing it to be a spell sometimes. But I do like the card. I agree with the sentiments you've had. I've never actually played it, so I guess everyone likes it more than I do because I've never had it in my my artifact decks. It does seem very strong in the late game. If you can get it down and you have artifacts left in your hand, then it obviously will be exceptional in that stereo. I just don't know how often that scenario plays out. I think it's pretty good, but I still think it's a middle of the pack card. I don't actively go after it.
Yeah, same. All right, we got a rare. This rare is going to go to the next Patreon winner. That's how I start stockpiling again after we've given away the other one.
And just so we're clear, Marshall did tell me if he ever opens like a Tarmogoyf or a Dark Confidant, he's got a stack of less valuable rares to replace them with.
Come on, every week I'm rooting for the listeners to get something sweet, and you go and say something like that. But you know in your heart of hearts
that you'll get to keep it.
No, of course not. They would get whatever it was. In this case, it's Hurkyl's Recall.
Which is funny because on Magic Online there was a period of time when that card was worth like $70.
Yeah, it was like a 50 ticket thing when I bought into Vintage. But in real life it's not worth much, and even on Magic Online it has plummeted appropriately. So
yeah, it was a kind of artificial supply just because, not exactly artificial demand rather, but the demand was really small, but the supply was even smaller. Now the supply is very large and the demand is not, I think, changed very much.
Yeah, it's still quite small. It's a 1 and a blue instant. Return all artifacts target player owns to his or her hand. And, it's funny because I did pick up one of these in a draft on Magic Online. And I picked it up because I wanted to own. I just didn't have it, right? And it was like one of those things where, like you said before, it was 50 ticks or whatever. So I was like, yeah, sweet, I'll just take a Hurkyl's Recall. It was in the middle to late stages of a pack. And I actually did play against the blue-white affinity deck. And I'm like, well, I'll just bring this in. This could be sweet. And I brought it in. And, having never actually cast a Hurkyl's Recall in my life, I realized that even though it's very situational, it skyrocketed to one of my favorite cards because my opponent, by the time I cast it, had 3 creatures, an equipment, and 2 citadels out when I cast this card. And it turns out it returns those to their hand too. We're not used to bounce spells returning lands, but I did read it. I'm like, wait a minute, this just says artifact. It doesn't specify anything else. And I'm sure, people that have played a lot of Vintage are like, well, yeah, obviously. But for me, I haven't. And it was great. I mean, I wiped their whole board and left them with 2 lands on turn 6 after they curved out. And I hit them for 7 or whatever. And that was all she wrote. Interesting though. It actually does pop up as a sideboard card in this format, though only against really one deck.
Yeah. And yeah. Hurkyl's Recall, I've seen this card cast against Affinity and not do that much. I mean, it is a card you board in most of the time against like a really dedicated Affinity deck, but as someone who has cast a lot of Hurkyl's Recalls, though admittedly not in this exact format, it's not just kill all your opponent's artifacts. They do get to recast them, and sometimes they'll have a draw where they just recast them.
Yeah, totally. But it's certainly not on the radar here. I'm slamming Palaka Worm. I think that all three of us are, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there was really nothing close.
This was a really uneventful pack.
Yeah. It was a bunch of reasonable cards that none of us wanted and a bunch of bad cards that we certainly didn't want, and then Palaka Worm. So that tale was set in stone before we even opened the pack. Okay, so let's move on now to our main segment here, where we're going to be having a chat with Chris. And, Chris, you're considered one of the better limited players around. You're really known. Your reputation is that of a limited player. And so I thought, well, we would take a chance to pick your brain about how you approach limited and some of your opinions and stuff. Like Luis said earlier, you've got a lot of ideas that go against the grain, the typical notions that you'll hear about limited. And I'm sure a lot of those will line up with some of the messages that we like to put out on this show. And another reason why I wanted to have you come on, Chris, is that I know that you care a lot about helping people improve at Magic. I've read your column that you've been writing, and I've also had a chance to talk to you personally about it. And I can I got the sense and the vibe that you are on the same page that Luis and I were on when it comes to this, having a passion for helping people improve and, in a real tangible way, right? Not just in a, I'd love it if you got better. That would be great. But in a way that's like, you've actually put some thought into it and have put your articles on. So what I want to start off with here, Chris, is I want you to tell us about your path to becoming a good limited player. Were you always good? What taught you to be good? Who and or what? How long did the process take? I want you to just walk us through, how your path was to get to become a good limited player.
Well, it's interesting because I never actually, my first ever draft was not until I was in college. I didn't do any really play any limited until I was about 19, and the local shop at my local game store did a Saturday draft, which is where everybody came together and there was like 30 people and you broke into pods and you played everybody. You didn't have to play the people in your own pod. And I started doing that, and I think my second or third ever draft was still one of the best decks I've ever drafted to this day, 20 years later.
Wow, just did it.
So I kind of always had an inherent ability to see the forest through the trees, so to speak, about picking the cards and figuring out what my deck's trying to do and understanding the inherent synergies between archetypes, stuff like that. When it comes to playing the games, though, it took me a very, very long time to be able to play Magic, even at a competent level. I top 64 at a bunch of limited PTs back in the day, and we're talking 2005-ish, 2006 maybe, and I was playing actively badly, probably in the 30th percentile, maybe 20th percentile of players in the tournament.
Oh man!
But I was all of my decks were unbelievable. If I could go back to Pro Tour San Diego from 04, 05, or 06, I don't remember which year exactly, and play the decks I drafted in that Pro Tour, I guarantee you I would be in the top 8 of that tournament right now.
Mm-hmm. Was that the Mirrodin Darksteel Pro Tour?
Yeah, four of my decks had a minimum of 2 Spike Shot Goblins.
That's just funny because that was also my first Pro Tour.
Yeah.
And crazy.
I went 2-1, 2-1, 2-1, 2-1, 2-1, I think, in all 5 pods. And I think I could have 3-0'd 3, maybe 4. I might even not have lost. If I replayed all those matches, I might not have lost a match in that PT. But it took a long time to understand how to effectively manage your resources in a game of limited, how to understand how to shut your opponent's objectives down, how to press your own objectives, things of that nature. And then obviously my ability to draft and construct sealed decks and draft decks obviously developed over time also. I'm not going to say that I was just a savant or was born into it. I always had an affinity for it, but it obviously grew. I loved it. And just like anything in life, you get good at what you love and what you do in your free time and I actively wanted to be drafting all the time. So we used to, every tournament down here in Florida, I didn't even play constructed Magic. I didn't even have a collection that would allow me to play. All my cards got stolen when I was a kid. I was 18 or 19. I had a bunch of foils. I had a red-green deck with foil Urza's Rages. They all got stolen. And I just never had I haven't had a collection really since. And so I would just draft at every tournament. I would go to limited PTQs only. I would only play limited GPs. And I was like that for like 10 years, and I loved it. And that's what happened. And then eventually I realized that my ego was way bigger than I was. Like, I thought I was really, really good. And I was really good at picking cards. I was really bad at playing Magic. And I grew up a lot in my 20s and realized that if I wanted to actually do anything with Magic, I had to learn, really respect the game and learn to play a lot better. And
so you started putting in extra effort then to to improve your gameplay. What did that look like? Did you turn to some of your fellow Floridian drafters to improve, or was it more of a solo operation?
I think it was mainly just a mental shift. Basically, if you don't think you're doing anything wrong, you don't learn anything. And I got to the point where I would lose games and feel like I should have won them, and start playing. Like, to this point, I usually play almost every game of Magic I play. I run it back in my head every single turn to figure out whether there's something I should have done or could have done differently. And whether or not, did I press an objective too hard? Did I play too defensively when I should have been more aggressive? Did I something of that nature? And I started doing that, and it really just kind of started flowing from there. And I still make mistakes. And the other thing is, when you realize that, like, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter how quote unquote good you are or how many people think you're great. What matters is, like, whether you won or lost the game, and whether you're going to win or lose the next game. Then it makes it all a lot easier. Just let go. Back then in my early 20s, if someone said I made a mistake, I would argue with them and tell them, no, you're wrong, or you're stupid, or you didn't understand. And now I'll be like, oh, did I? What could I have done better? Yep, you're right. I punted.
But you're more willing to listen to that kind of advice now.
Yeah, I mean, it just comes from age. And I know nobody in their early 20s right now that's in that spot that I was in is going to listen to this and all of a sudden change. But hopefully,
I mean, it is very valuable to admit when you've screwed up. I mean, if you like Chris said, if you don't think you screwed up and aren't looking for that, you're just not going to figure it out. Like, we were talking before the show, Chris, we've played, in multiple top eights and 4 top 8 and just a ton of tournaments. We've just played against each other so many times. And when we play against each other, we're usually just like, man, I screwed up. Or like, yeah, I really should have done that differently. Like, we're both just like very much in that spot.
Yeah. And I remember back, I played probably the worst on-camera game of Magic, or I don't know if it was on camera, but it was featured ever against Luis.
Grand Prix Atlanta.
In Grand Prix Atlanta. I think if I played that game right now, I'd probably not only would have won the Grand Prix, but I would have won game 3 at 18-20 life. And I died in that game somehow. With a Johnny, I had a Johnny Vengeance, I had Necrogenesis, I had everything, and I just lost somehow. And I look back on the game, and I just cast all of my spells in the wrong order and targeted all the wrong things, and it was a nightmare. So yeah, you live and you learn.
Now, moving the discussion to our listeners, I've also opened up, like I said, on the Patreon, questions for you, and I've got a bunch that I'll be asking you here. The first one comes from Sven Haman, who wants to know, if you could tell someone only one thing that would make them better at Limited, what would it be? And he says someone being a mid-level player, like an average Limited Resources listener.
The most important thing to Limited Magic, and I swear if you take nothing away from this podcast, definitely take this and not my terrible analogy. Don't play Limited Magic from the perspective of pressing your objectives. Stop your opponent from doing whatever your opponent is trying to do. If you can, your opponent will be either trying to speed a game up or slow a game down, or close a game out or push an objective almost all the time. And your goal is to stop whatever they're doing, and therefore you can press your objective so much easier. So unless you have a card that completely is something they could never play around, like an overrun or some card that's just in a scenario where you have an overrun, then maybe you allow them to be into a race. For example, when I played this deck in Atlantic City, I was Esper colors, I was blue, black, splash white, but I had Damnable Pact and Harsh Sustenance. So what I would do is my opponents would have an objective where they would always be trying to be on the aggressive with me. And so my number one objective in my deck building and my strategy was to stem aggression. However, sometimes during the games, I would be able to lure them into being that aggressive strategy, and then I'd be able to finish them with a fireball that they weren't expecting, or finish them with a Harsh Sustenance on their big creature for 4. But as long as you know what your opponent is trying to do, you'll know not only what they have in play, you'll know what they have in their hand and what their end game is usually. I think my best aspects in Magic is the subjective game. Understanding my opponent's objectives, understanding what they have based on how they play, and understanding how to not allow them to get to their end game. And that's why it's interesting to watch me play, because typically my sequencing is excellent and my end game is very good. Sometimes I'm not a type A personality like most Magic players, so sometimes I miss little things, but usually my objectives are very clear. So that's what I would tell anybody listening to this. Figure out what your opponent's trying to do and stop them from doing it. And if you do that, you'll end up winning in a ton more games, because you're in limited. You can switch from the aggressive player to the passive player, the aggressive to the defensive on a single turn, and it could be turn 2, it could be turn 3, and you never know. And the way you know is by what your opponent's trying to do. If your opponent is trying to trade creatures, maybe you don't want to trade. If your opponent's trying to push through damage, you don't want to take any damage. So look at it that way.
Okay. Rick Speed, also from the Patreon, wants to know, does limited really just come down to resource management? Does the person with the most cards in hand and most creatures on the board really just always win?
Absolutely not. I've played some games, especially recently, where my opponents had more cards in hand, more resources, and all those cards were better, and I still won the game. Just by pushing my objectives. I guess the best way to think about it is people will give you windows, and you want to basically try to push your resources and your advantage in through those windows. A lot of times, when you talk about, does it come down to having more resources? Well, in order to win with a deck that has more resources, you have to be able to structure adequate defenses in order to utilize your additional resources. Having more things and not being able to deploy them doesn't help you. So I don't think it comes down to that exclusively. You can turn it into that if you'd like to, but that means you need to be the one who's able to create more resources more efficiently than your opponent. Magic is a resource allotment game at its core. But because your life total is one of those resources, if someone can press your life total significantly early in the game, a lot of the other resources don't actually end up mattering. And so it's hard to say no to that question, because technically life is a resource. But from the gist of the question and what I think he's trying to ask, it's not just whoever has the most cards wins. It's whoever's cards line up the best, whoever's able to deal damage when they're supposed to, whoever's able to extract the most value at the times that they need to, and whoever's able to push the objective that is the most important to them. And the aggressive players, that's going to be life total. The control players, that's going to also be life total, but it's going to be conservation of life total, because they're going to win with their extra cards or their card quality in the late game.
Now, when it comes to drafting, you sit down for a booster draft. What kind of a drafter are you? I think many people fall into two camps. One of them, which tends to be the camp that we tend to push more on the show, which is the stay open. Read the table, that kind of stuff. Try to get into where your seat wants you to be as far as the draft goes. But there is another camp of players who feel like, go with your first few picks and stick to your guns, or even maybe have an idea of the strategy that you'd like to draft before you sit down and try to make that happen. Where do you fall on that spectrum?
Yeah, I don't believe in that at all. In fact, I think that that strategy is productive only for people that have a finite goal from an individual limited performance. So say
How
for
do you mean?
example, so say for example, you are a going into a pro tour and you think you broke the pro tour format and you expect to get 9 wins out of your standard deck, and you really just want to try to go 4-2 in limited, then maybe you can. There's an archetype where both colors are deep enough that you should be able to get uh, a reasonable deck to where to allow you to go 2-1 and not take a risk. However, as is most things in life, if you're going to do things well and properly, you just stand a much better um, opportunity of doing 2-1 or better anyway. It's a negative expected value play to put yourself into any archetype or any strategy prior to drafting, because the reality of the situation is, even if you favor a certain archetype, if you're remaining open, you're only going to not play that archetype when you're not supposed to play that archetype. So you're just gaining value, because in the scenarios where you're supposed to play your favorite archetype, you're still going to play it, and in the scenarios where you're not going to play it. And
And you
so
mean, and by supposed to, you mean that it was open enough for you to draft it.
exactly. So say for example, I really wanted to draft blue black in dragons because I think blue black is very good. So I sit down and I'm gonna give a slight preference to blue black. So if I have a common that's good in blue black versus a common that's good in green white and they're equally powered, I will lean towards the blue black one because I'd rather be in that archetype. That being said, if I just that's different than saying, okay, I'm just gonna play blue black no matter what. So if I take that blue card and then uh, take a few more picks and black's just completely not open, then you can back into something else like blue white, which is what happened in the draft that I played LSV in Atlantic City. I ended up blue white because black just wasn't open pack one, and then it just became wide open later in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
But
Well, that was in that draft in particular was partially because you put me into black intentionally because, and this was actually a really interesting spot. And again, I've talked about this before. It just happens to be at this last tournament. We both played each other a bunch, but, you opened a pack where you knew that I was going to second pick pacifism, and I did. And in order to force me off pacifism, you intentionally passed me black cards,
right,
hoping that I was going to go not white. And it actually worked. After pack one, I was basically mono black.
yeah, because I took secure the waist out. I took secure the waist out over the pacifism, and I knew that LSV would kind of have to go black there. And I had started white, and I basically was mono white and he was mono black, and I moved into blue and he moved into blue because we were both just looking for supplemental colors anyway. And his cards were mono black, so he just took a few fringe blue cards to help out his overall exploit theme.
Yeah,
But,
I had like four blue cards in my deck.
right, and they wouldn't even have been good in my deck
No,
anyway.
two of them were blue black cards.
Right, and so yeah, I think that you're really just handicapping yourself by having a predetermined mindset. I think that understanding which color combinations are strong in a format is essential to being a good drafter, but I think committing yourself to any color combination prior to going into a draft is extremely handicapping your ability to do well. And it may not even be extremely handicapping, but it's certainly at least 15, I would say like 15 to 20% of your drafts, it's going to significantly hinder you those times where you're not supposed to be in that color combination.
Okay.
I actually had a question,
Luis.
One of the things that I've noticed, again, we've drafted together many times, starting in 2005 or something along those lines. You tend to evaluate cards differently than most people. Not always. I mean, sometimes you're on board like, yeah, these are the best three commons, and everyone agrees on that. But sometimes I've seen your pick orders vary pretty wildly. Have you noticed a trend of like things you specifically value less than the like general population does, or vice versa? I'm just curious if you've noticed this within your own preferences.
Well, I think that the main thing that happens to me is I just have a complete sliding scale for every card at all times. And so I often make very obscure picks. One of my favorite picks is I had a black white deck in the previous format it was dragons that had a ton of removal, maybe like 12 or 12 removal spells, and I was light on win conditions. And I I had picked up a late blue white Hallowed Fountain, not Hallowed Fountain, but the Gain Life one. And going into pack 3, I took a Treasure Cruise over a debilitating injury, just because I was like, I have 10 pieces of removal. I don't really need another piece of removal, but I could run out of gas or have to use my removal inefficiently, because I don't have that many threads. So I just took a Treasure Cruise over, because my graveyard was always going to be full because I didn't have any creatures. So
and you had all removal.
Look, I'm not going to argue with that pick.
Yeah.
But I think that what happens is, I think that I'm just always trying to remain open-minded, and I'm keeping the overall context of my deck in my brain. I don't have a different scale than other people. So typically when people ask me a question, is it A or is it B, and they force me to answer, I typically will have the same answer as other people. But my real answer to that question is it A or is it B? And I'm like, okay, well, what else is in the pack? What have you passed? What's being passed to you? Like, what is your overall goal of your deck? And there's so many other things. I think that the biggest difference between me and other people is, like, I just don't really believe in pick orders at all. And I think that cards vary from like a 6 to a 9 to a 3, depending on your deck. And that those scales are constantly sliding in my head. And I'm always willing to sell out for a card that I need. Whereas a lot of people will just be like, you know what? I probably just shouldn't take this because this other card's better. So I just need to take this other card. And they'll just end up regretting it. And I never do that. I just take what I need, and my decks are almost always pretty good. So
yeah, that is a situation that people find themselves in fairly often, I think, and it can be difficult, right? Where, like you said, you've already got a whole lot of some part of a deck, and then you don't have a lot of the other, and you open up your booster pack and you get like the best version of the thing that you already have a lot of. And then there's a mediocre version of the thing that you really need. And that can be really tough. I think you're right. Most people default to just taking the card that you would take in a vacuum in that scenario. But like you said, sometimes it does come back to bite you because you don't get another shot at that card you really needed.
Yeah, and the other thing is I hate draft so many cards. I'm like one of the most hateful drafters because I play to win the pod every time. And so I just take cards I can't beat.
Really? You'll hate draft pretty aggressively, huh?
Third, fourth pick sometimes.
Whoa, that's really aggressive.
Yeah.
Wow. So, our stance on the show, and it's been my stance for quite a while, is quite the opposite. I will take almost any card that I feel like could make the sideboard or main deck over even a very good card that I could have a hard time with. What's your reasoning on it?
Well, like I said, I just like, if you're in the right colors and you're doing the thing you're supposed to do, you typically have a glutton of replacement level cards around the end of your deck. Mm-hmm. So taking the 4 mana 3/3 guy with dash over taking a card that could beat me in the draft just isn't worth it. Oftentimes when you're playing against good people and you're late in a draft, I know I'm going to sit down and I know there's a good chance I'm going to have to beat Luis to top 8 that tournament. So if I pass him another a card I could never beat to take a card that I don't really need, I'm lowering my expected value of that in that tournament. Now that might be because I have a lot of confidence in my ability to get enough playables. I also am constantly aware of how many playables I have in my pool. Obviously, I don't have the luxury to do this if I'm short on playables, or I don't have sufficient creatures, or I don't have sufficient removal, or I need something out of the pack. Then obviously I'll take the card that I need. But if there's a card that I don't actively need, and there's a card that I actively am going to have a very difficult time beating, I will take the card that's very difficult to beat. And I'll do it every time. And a lot of people that have watched me draft are very surprised by that. The other thing is if I have, like, let's say I have a siege, I take every enchantment removal spell in the draft. Like
you'll just snap them all up.
Yeah, you can never, like, everybody checks their sideboard, no one has them because I just take them all. So
I never knew that about you. You're so hateful, Chris.
I don't like to tell people that, then they get all mad when they have to draft with me. But
hey, it's your right. I mean, you are giving up something by doing it.
I'm pretty surprised. I really disagree with like the value proposition there. I mean, I understand that you want to win the pod, but like your win percentage has to be higher by taking good playables for your deck, right?
well, it depends on if it's good. I mean, if it's actively good, then I take it. But like, I just think that like there's a lot of times where around fifth and sixth pick where you just get a pack that just doesn't really have a good card for you. I mean, it has an okay card, a card that you would probably play, but like the replacement in your deck is like almost negligible.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, I guess when you say third or fourth pick, I'm envisioning you taking like hate drafting over taking like, I don't know, Glacial Stalker level of cards. If it's not that, that's a little different, but that is very different from where I'm at.
Yeah, I've definitely hate drafted cards over Glacial Stalker, but that's because I have like 3 Snowhorn Riders or whatever, or I just don't need a Glacial Stalker. But it's only when also it depends on like how bad the card is for me. Like if I have a bunch of like if I'm drafting a deck full of dragons and there's a Pinion Feast in the pack, or a 3-mana 2/3, I'm gonna take the Pinion Feast. Like they're not gonna kill my dragons any other way, so I'm just gonna take their Pinion Feast and then they can have the 2/3. I don't care. It's just my overall goal is to draft a deck that other people can't deal with and have the cards to deal with all the cards my opponents have. And so if I give them ways to answer my things, then I just give them ways to beat me.
Sheila Weissall wants to know, what's the best advice you can give to newer players on sequencing your plays? She says, I seem to always just play the card that I can cast. It doesn't always go too well.
I love this question because this was the biggest realization I had. I think one of the biggest realizations I had in Magic. There was this guy I used to play with. His name was Tare Blewett. And I don't even think he plays Magic anymore. He's a Florida guy. And he used to always, the games would go super long every time I played him. And every time he would have his like one removal spell, like 15 or 20 turns into the game to kill my like one really good card. And it would always drive me crazy. And then I realized that like he just refused to cast. If he could possibly survive without casting that card, he would save his whatever to kill my one thing that he needed to kill with it. And then I realized that like he was just playing way better than me and I was just stupid. And I by no means am I calling anyone stupid. I'm just saying for me not to realize that my opponent was sequencing his cards in such a way that he could beat me, it was just me, again, being ego driven and not really realizing what was going on. And so, Sheila, what I would say is that you have a sliding scale of power level amongst the cards in your deck and their deck. And the more powerful cards in your the more universal the answers are in your deck, the more you need to cherish them. So if you can sacrifice a different resource in order to save a card in your hand that has exponential value because of its ability to answer the complex nature of the threats in your opponent's deck, you should save that card and try to compromise other resources. In the long run, though, it's always a resource allotment game. I mean, if you can't afford to give up the extra 8 life that it's going to take you, or sacrifice the 2 creatures that you're going to have to double block with instead of using your Doomblade, then you just have to use it. There's not really any advantage to just Magic's not about you draw your cards and they draw their cards and you all put them on the table and see who wins. If it was, I certainly wouldn't play it. I'd go find something more interesting to do.
Yeah.
So you really have to think. I think what'll really help you, and this would be my short-term advice, start writing down all the cards your opponents play in the first game that you play against them, and then figure out which cards in your deck you have to beat the cards in their deck, and then try to play the cards in your deck against the cards in their deck that you need to do in order to win. So if you're playing a game of Limited and you have a Bone Splinters, and that's your only way to deal with an Eldrazi, let's say a Crusher, try not to cast your Bone Splinters until they cast their Crusher. Now, if you lay all these things out and realize that they just have a bunch of things you can't beat, then try to kill them real quick because they're going to beat you eventually anyway.
That's good. I like that advice. Abe McKinnon wants to know if there are 1 or 2 level up moments that you remember. What were they and how did they come to you? Level up moments, of course, are the times when you just described one with the guy you were playing against that made you realize, now wait a minute, this person's actually doing it more correctly than I am. Are there any, big ones of those that stood out to you, or was it more of a gradual process for you?
Well, it's weird because most of the realizations didn't happen at the time. I still, that game against Luis that we talked about earlier still haunts me. I still think about that game. I think that game made me a much better player.
So Luis scarred you for life, basically?
Yeah.
I was more an observer. I was just kind of playing my cards, in the manner they were meant to be played. Chris was the one in control of both of our destinies there.
And one of the most recent ones, and it was playing for top 8 of GP Toronto against my teammate Ari Lax, and I had the game played out in my head, and I knew exactly what was going on, and I had the game essentially won in my own mind, and I got to the turn where I had to execute the plan as I had seen fit, and I stopped and tried to reevaluate the board state, and I forgot a fundamental aspect of what I'd been thinking about for probably 2 or 3 turns, and when I did that, I made a mistake, and he ended up winning. And then he went on to win the tournament, and that was another really, really salty loss for me. I mean, it was nice that my teammate and friend won the tournament, and I was happy for him. But I was really mad at myself and really hurt about what I did, and so I realized that I was playing tired, and that in these Magic tournaments I was playing really badly at the end of the day, a lot of the time. And I was in very bad shape. I was eating very badly. I wouldn't eat correctly during the tournaments. I wouldn't eat before the tournaments. I wouldn't bring any snacks. I wouldn't bring any Gatorade. And I would fade at the end of the day. And I would just go on autopilot. And so I made like some pretty big changes, started eating a little better, started making sure to get up early, get breakfast every tournament, make sure to purchase food and drink throughout the day. Around 4 or 5 p.m. every time now at a tournament, I crush some large amount of food and caffeine to like push me through, and that actually made a huge difference. And that was right before Pro Tour Born of the Gods, which I top 8'd. So it's like if I won that match, I wouldn't have top 8'd the Pro Tour because I wouldn't have made those changes and done things a little bit differently. So,
oh, that's crazy. Troy Navarro wants to know, what's the best way to keep your draft from derailing? For example, what can you do if you get misleading signals or if someone changes their colors mid-draft? We've all had that happen to us. Is there a way to avoid drafting a poor deck due to that situation?
Yeah, there is. I mean, basically what happens is you have to know when the ship has sailed and when it hasn't. And how you do that is you really need to track what you're sending. And this is one of the biggest flaws that people have, is they don't track what they're sending sufficiently, so they don't really know what the people around them are doing. Like, because I knew that Luis took the pacifism in the pack that I opened, that's why I couldn't be black in the draft, because I had to cut white very hard to get him off of his pacifism, because I had first picked Secure the Waste over it. And once I realized maybe black was a little bit open in that pack, I realized the ship had sailed on black, that Luis was 100% in black, and if I moved it now, I wasn't going to get any in pack 2, and my deck was going to be bad. So what you need to really think about is try to actively think about what the person to your left is going to select out of the first 2 or 3 packs that you're passing. And what that does is that allows you to know where your wiggle room is. So say, for example, you pass Lightning Bolt is clear. Like, you take a rare, a green rare, you take a Pelakka-Worm. It's not rare, but let's just say we take Pelakka-Worm and we pass Lightning Bolt. Lightning Bolt's clearly the second best card in the pack. All right. So you're like, okay, this person's almost certainly going to take Lightning Bolt. If you get past a good red card, you can easily just still move into red at this point. But let's say there's another really strong green card. So you take another strong green card and you pass Burst Lightning, which is obviously the best card in the pack again. All right. Now this guy's going to fight you for red. So if you pass Lightning Bolt and Burst Lightning, you can move into red if you think that the next 4 or 5 picks in this pack and then the beginning of pack 3 is worth it. And that a lot of times that depends on the set alignments, like which colors are strong in which packs. And I talked a lot about that on the previous podcast that I did. because sometimes you can afford to just get cut off in a color pack too, because that color stinks in that pack anyway, depending on which set is which and how the cards line up. But you got to understand when you've passed enough cards that someone's going to fight you for it. Also, so then if you have 2 green cards and you've passed those 2 red cards, you know that red, basically the best colors to pair with red are, I mean, well, in Modern Masters, red kind of pairs with anything, but he's probably not going to be green. It's unlikely that he's blue. He's most likely to be either red, white, or red, black. So maybe you have a lot of options to move into a green, white tokens deck. You have the option to move into a green, blue deck, and you get to see what's coming now. And maybe if you have to abandon green, you want to abandon in such a way where you're not abandoning green to move into red, because if you abandon green to move into red, you're going to already have lost your first 2 playables from the pack 1. And then in pack 2, you're not going to get any red because you passed Lightning Bolt and Burst Lightning. And so this guy's he probably picked up a Blood Ogre or something. He's probably locked in on red, and he's going to take all your red cards pack 2. And then you're going to have a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and you're going to have a hodgepodge going into the last pack. So you have to know where you can move based on what you're passing. And that's really the most important thing. And sometimes it's worth it. Like there's been sets where the 3rd pack is just so strong in a color. Like where it used to be Odyssey, Torment. If black was open, you're just like, I'm just going to cut you in black, because if I can get Torment pack 3, then it's worth it, you know? Because Torment's just all black cards. So, and maybe it's worth just letting this guy be red and just cutting him and just moving into red, because you're just going to cut him pack 3 and you're willing to do it. That's obviously not the case in Modern Masters because all the packs are the same, but this would also happen a lot. Like a good example of this is and I saw a million people derail their drafts. It was Journey, Return to Ravnica. Mm-hmm. And the red-green uncommons, Gruul Warchant, the 4/5 that when he came into play he fought.
Yeah.
And Armed and Dangerous. 2 of those ran together almost all the time. And what would happen is if you first picked one, the guy to your left would almost always second pick one. But the red-green guild was in the second pack. So you would pass them a good red-green card, and then they would cut you in the red-green guild coming back in pack 2.
And they'd get all the big payoff.
Exactly. So
I remember that.
That format was weird because you could cut the person on your right.
Yeah, that was a weird one. I remember that, yeah.
And so, like, obviously the format is a little bit changing by that, but I think the most important word of advice, like I said, is just be very aware of what you're being passed and what you are passing. If you know exactly what the guy to your left is doing in this draft, then you know exactly where you can move. Like at the end of the draft with Luis, I could have probably named you 20 to 25 cards in his card pool at the end of the draft, because I just knew it was just very clear what he would be taking, because the packs just lined up in such a way that the most powerful card was the most powerful by a lot every time. So
now so this is interesting to me though. So, you know, if you feel like you've got a really good grasp on what the player to your left is drafting, how do you leverage it? You seem to be okay with putting Luis into a specific color. In this case, it was black, and making sure that he stayed there. That's kind of playing nice with your neighbors, which generally will result in both of you having a better deck than if you don't. Is that your goal? Do you ever leverage it in sort of a more insidious way and do the old, you know, hook and cut, get somebody in a color and then just start taking the color from them? Like, how do you leverage that information?
Well, Marshall, I've won a lot of 3-on-3 drafts in my day, buddy.
Yes. Money, late night money draft all-star.
I wonder if the 3-on-3 drafting is what makes you want to hate draft more, because it's so good in that format.
Yeah.
I wonder if that just changes your valuation of that.
I don't know. I mean, the way the GPs are now too, they're so top weighted that
is true.
You just have to win the pod. Like getting it. First of all, I guess basically I feel like if I draft a 5 out of 10, I should 2-1, and if I draft an 8 or 9 out of 10, I have a good chance to 3-0. So like, I basically feel like I have more wiggle room at the bottom than I do at the top, if that makes sense. Like I have to beat I literally have to beat that card to win the draft. Now, granted, that person might lose to someone else, and I may never face it. But I think that might be true. It might be some from the team drafting. It might just be the way that I look at limited in general. But
so for the team drafting, of course, for people that have watched, any of the team drafts on the team GPs, the team limited GPs, it's three-person teams, and they sit alternate, and the dynamic completely changes in draft. Where in a normal draft, which is kind of what I was getting at a minute ago with my question, which is, you generally want to play nice with your neighbors. If you can set them into a color that you're not in, then you're more likely to get more cards. If that person's on the left in the second pack, and if you figure out what the person on your right is sending you, and kind of where they want you to be, then you can trust that, well, their interests line up with mine, because if they put me in a color that's not what they're in, then that helps them too. So everybody benefits in that scenario. But when you do a 3-on-3 draft, which is the money draft format too, it's just not as prevalent as it once was, but it's something that was, I know that the Florida people love money drafting and have for a long time as well, which is the 3-on-3 draft. And in that scenario, it becomes a zero-sum game, because you do know that you're going to play against the other people in the draft, and that your teammates are going to play against the other people in the draft for sure. So Sending them, shipping away big bombs, even if you don't think it's in their color, or even if you do, but you just don't care because it's not in your color, becomes prohibitive. And I could certainly see how it could kind of shell shock you into a mentality that's a lot more defensive than it needs to be necessarily when you're, 1 versus 7, and realistically 1 versus 3 of the remaining 7. It's interesting.
I forgot. I had forgotten your question because Luis's comment intrigued me, and I went down the rabbit hole with him about the team drafting. I mean, it's not necessarily ever insidious per se. It is. I am willing to hate the second or third gray merchant if I know you're in black. If we're drafting,
you'll do it. Yeah,
it's basically one of those situations where I will allow your deck to be all like very, very good, just slightly worse than mine.
That's funny.
And I don't really. I mean, like I said, it's a process. Drafting is a process. Drafting and playing the matches and like doing a 8-man draft pod is a process of activities leading to a result. And I just look at it. I just take the whole overall process and think about the end game and what do I need to do to win this pod, and how do I win this pod. And like I said. I typically don't do many things to hate my opponents unless they're cards that, like, oftentimes I will purposefully pass cards also that are good but actively not good against my deck. Also to like try to get them to, like, I know they'll play it and they'll be happy, but I just know the card won't be good against my deck. So you just think about all those things. I mean, I just think about all those things on every pack, and that's what I do.
Scott Osterling wants to know, he says, you, Fenel, also Matt Sperling, the streamer, SGC Doc, also, Tom Martell came to mind for me, are all lawyers. Is there something about Magic that appeals to the lawyer part of your brain? Are those in your profession overrepresented in the population of adult players?
Well, I mean, I think when you take the stimulation received through law school and the lawyer profession in general, and you take the stimulation received through Magic, you'll notice that they're very similar. You're taking a large amount of facts and a large amount of not necessarily facts, and you're trying to paint a big picture and press your objective through manipulation of those facts and those factors. And if that type of thing interests you, then it makes sense that you would be interested in both.
I couldn't figure out if you were talking about being a lawyer or playing a game of Magic.
Right. Well, that was my point.
Yeah.
I guess I did a good job.
Exactly.
And so I don't necessarily think that Magic breeds lawyers, or lawyers necessarily are drawn to Magic per se. I just think if someone finds both and those are the things that they like, then they're very likely to stick to and be interested in both. So it makes a lot of sense that the people that find both like both, because for that reason.
You going to have one of those big, like, bulletin board things on the side of the freeway with your face on it, like Better Call Chris or
Better Call Fenel.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't actually know yet. I haven't been hired yet, so I don't know.
You haven't printed out the big poster yet.
Hey, Marshall, how come nobody ever asks why so many Magic players are game designers?
Great question, Luis. We'll tackle that on next week's episode.
I think we need a whole episode for that, probably.
Yeah. Daniel Rhodes wants to know. He says, "Chris, I play a lot of sealed, and this, you've done so well at sealed, Fenel, and I think this is why Daniel's decided to direct this question at you." He says, "When you have a pool that has the most strength over two colors, but slightly lacks on playables, maybe forcing you into a small splash or an option for a weaker, pure two-color pair, how do you decide between the two?"
I almost never splash in that scenario, unless it's free, like unless you have mana sources that give you your third color easily. For example, the deck I just played in the Modern Masters GP in Vegas, my deck was light playables. I was a red-green creature deck with a bunch of rares, and I really only had about 18 cards I wanted to play. So I had to fill my deck out somehow. So what I try to do is I try to cobble together the best mix of the last 4 or 5 bad cards that play well together, which is what I did in this scenario.
So you kind of line them up in groups and pick the team with the best result there.
Yeah, like I played 2 of the 2-mana 1/1 that double strike that you can pay a green and black and pump him via Shino or something.
Mm-hmm.
I played 2 of that guy. I played a Spectral Possession with no white mana and an Overwhelm, because
wow,
those 4 and I know this sealed, by the way.
Yeah, no, I'm aware.
and those were just the best 4 in concert, so to speak, to not mess my deck up too much. I did play 1 Swamp just to threaten the pump on those 2 guys, and I think I had one other reason to play a Swamp in my deck. Oh, and I splashed a Necrogenesis. Yeah, that was the other card. So I played Necrogenesis, 2 Viashino guys, an Overwhelm, and an off-color Spectral as my last 5 cards in that that sealed, just to not overcommit my deck to another color, because I thought that I was more likely to lose games to drawing cards that I couldn't cast and or being unable to play them, and I didn't have adequate fixing. I played, like I said, the only card I couldn't cast off of red and green mana was Necrogenesis. So that was
and that's of course not an early game play anyway.
Right, and it's a great that he asked that question, because that's literally exactly what my pool was. I mean, I had Banefire, Thunderblast, Hellkite Charger. Like, my cards were great, but I only had 18 of them. So
and you will tend to try to not splash or try to stick to your guns as much as possible. I want to go a little deeper on a subject that you talked about a few times already, which is you kept talking about objectives in a game of Magic, and how you said that your overarching strategy is basically to prevent your opponent from meeting their objectives, while employing yours at some point as well. Besides the obvious objectives of a Magic game, winning, getting their life total to 0, whatever. What are you talking about? What are these objectives that you mean? Do you mean small in-game things like, I'd like to start attacking with this creature, or do you mean bigger picture stuff like how they're trying to leverage the game as far as like who's the beatdown and that kind of stuff?
It's both. I think there's short-term objectives and long-term objectives. I had a game on Moto that I played like a few days ago where a guy attacked me with a Kami of the Ancient Law with a Kite Sail on it, and I snap blocked with a Battle Grace Angel because I just knew he couldn't have a pump spell based on how he played the previous turn.
Mm-hmm.
And he just immediately conceded the game.
Block concede.
That's the concession of shame. Yeah.
Yeah, the shame concession. I like it.
Well, because like it was obvious to me that he was trying to bloodthirst his creatures, and there's a fundamental rule of Magic that this will also help you, by the way, if you're trying to improve your game. There's a rule that me and Bill Stead came up with that's about probably 12 years old or 13 years old now, called Never Block with Spiritmonger. So back in Invasion Block, you would always have to play your Spiritmonger on turn, tap out for it, because you just, against the aggressive decks, because you just never had time really to wait, and it was just, they could never deal 6 to it anyway.
I mean, that thing's just a ridiculous bomb, right? Isn't it like a 6/6 for 5 with a bunch of abilities?
It's a 6/6 for 5 that regenerates and changes color, and if it kills a creature, it gets +1/+1. So,
and this was in what set was this in?
In Apocalypse. It was in Apocalypse,
which came out in what, 2000, the year 2000 or something? I mean,
something like that.
That's ridiculous. So that I mean, because that card would hold its own in modern era Magic, right? That would be a full on bomb, even at this level.
The 2000 Spiritmonger, the 2000 Siege Rhino, the Siege Rhino of 2000.
Exactly.
But so what would happen is they would always attack into it, and no matter how much you tried to figure out that they would not be able to kill it if you block, they would always kill it every time. Like it didn't matter. Like it didn't matter if there was like 2 cards in their deck that they could have. They would have them both, and they would kill it every time. And no matter how much it looked like you shouldn't block or you should block, if you did, you just always lost your Spiritmonger and then lost the game because you didn't have your giant guy that they could never beat. So for me to block with Battle Grace Angel, I have to be pretty sure this is the equivalent of blocking with Spiritmonger. You know, my card's so great. How bad is it for me to really take 3? Like, you're supposed to take it there. But it was just so obvious that he was trying to push through his Bloodthirst cards that, and that he couldn't have a pump spell based on how he played. I just completely got him to concede the game on the spot by blocking with my card that I shouldn't block with. And, I think that what happens a lot is that there's a right play in Magic based on the given information. And I think that good players will always expect you to make the right play based on that information. And sometimes if you pay close attention, they're relying on you to make the play you're supposed to make. And sometimes And it's weird because this is a sliding scale, because they're basically also having to judge your competency to know whether or not you know what the right play is. Right. So it's a leveling game. So you really have to figure out what his motivations are. And sometimes his motivations for attacking is that you're not going to block because your creature's worth too much to you, and I can run a bluff here. Sometimes his motivation is, I have giant growth, and I'm going to kill your guy, and you're going to look stupid. And if you can figure out which of those 2 things is the truth, then you have a big advantage.
But this is one of those objectives that you were talking about. Like in this case, it's a smaller scale one where the opponent is saying, my objective is to get in some damage so that I can get a Bloodthirst creature down, and you are not going to block my creature with your bomb because you need to keep that card around, so I'm going to go ahead and attack with it. And what you've done is, if you said, all right, so this is what your objective is, I know why you would want to do that, would you actually risk this creature just getting blocked and dying to do it? And if you say, yeah, and then especially if you can look back at the previous turn and say, my opponent had a pump spell last turn, they for sure would have used it in this scenario, and they didn't. So that leaves one unknown card that had come off the top of the deck probably. And, after having put all that together, you say, I'm willing to take the risk here and block with my bomb.
Right. And even if it's a pump spell in those colors, unless it's brute force, he's still going to trade. So I'm still going to get the 2-for-1 anyway. It's not good for me. I'd rather have my Battle Grace Angel, but like if he plays a Mighty Leap or a Blades of Veilsveil and trades with my guy, it's not the end of the world for me.
Right.
But yeah, so that's like an example of a small objective, but then you have to figure out how like those small objectives fit into your end game. Like there's scenarios like this where all of those same things are created the same. Everything that I just said is the same. But let's say I have a 10/10 in play that's attacking and gaining me 10 life a turn.
Or 11.
Right, or whatever. then I'm not going to block with my Battle Grace Angel because I don't care if he Bloodthirsts a creature or plays any Bloodthirst card in the format for all I care, because I'm just going to attack with my 10/10 and gain 10 next turn. So I'm not going to. So even though I realize that there's probably an 80% chance that he's bluffing, maybe a 90% chance that he's bluffing, I'm 100% to win the game if I don't block with Battle Grace Angel, regardless of whether he's bluffing or not. So I'm just not going to block.
Yeah, this is the kind of spot where it's obviously varies greatly depending on situation, but you have to kind of look at it again from, like you've said this whole episode, look at from your opponent's perspective what they're trying to accomplish. If you know your opponent's dead, if your Battle Grace survives, even if you're like 90% sure they don't have a pump spell, you can still not block there because you both know that they're dead. There's no reason to risk it. The trickiest parts, of course, is when it's a really close game.
Right, and that was the scenario. It wasn't a really close game, but if he Bloodthirsts a 5/5 there, and then on the next turn he gets to Kite Sail a 5/5, and then my Battle Grace is shut down, I didn't have a big ground creature, so it was pretty bad for me. He was still behind, but he could easily recover in that game if I don't block and he gets to Bloodthirst a big creature. So.
That's pretty sweet. And then what about for bigger picture objectives that you see from your opponent? Thinking in terms of like, you're in the developing stages of the game, each players are playing their lands. You're getting an idea for what their deck's trying to do. You were saying that you're trying to stop their objectives in that way. How do you approach that? Let's say your opponent looks like they're trying to slow things down. They're playing a controlling color pair and they haven't really put anything on board yet, or maybe they put out a defender or something like that. And you're starting to get the hint that, all right, this player wants to go long here.
Right. Well, if a player's trying to go long and you're in limited, there's basically only one real consideration that you have when you're deciding whether or not to just basically jam your threats as fast as possible and create as much pressure as possible. Is like, could they have a mass removal spell? Let's take in, for the sense of simplicity, let's take into account that they do not have that in the given scenario based on, like, maybe we saw their draft viewer, maybe we're just based on the way they're playing we just don't think they have a mass removal spell. Mm-hmm. Assuming we don't think that, then basically what you're going to do is you're going to try to press through as much damage as possible. Maybe you'll even sacrifice a creature in the early game to get them to a low life total, as you may not be able to push through the last damage later. Maybe it also determines what you have seen. Maybe you've seen ways for them to gain life in the late game. If that's the case, then maybe it's slightly worse for you to sacrifice a creature. But basically, the short story here is if they're trying to make the game go slow, you make the game go fast. If they're trying to make the game go fast, you make the game go slow. A more specific example is standard right now, in my opinion, in a lot of matchups is a downfall count. And basically, I played the Red-Green Devotion deck with the TCG player.
Which you won. Congratulations.
Oh, thanks. And most of my games were a downfall count. I had a bunch of threats in my deck that really could only be downfalled.
Now you're talking about Hero's Downfall here.
Hero's Downfall, right.
Uh-huh.
Like I had Nissa, I had Xenagos, and I had Atarka, which Atarka could only die to Crux or Downfall, but typically they needed to use the Crux on all the ground creatures, so they rarely could Crux dragons, especially if they had their own. So against the Esper Dragons matchup. So a lot of times when you're talking about pressing your objectives, you're just trying to figure out whether or not they have a downfall. And sometimes they don't have a downfall, so all you want to do is get your card that they can't kill with anything but downfall in play. So it's like, okay, well, they have a Hero's Downfall here. Maybe I can get them to use it on my Courser. Maybe I can get them to use it on a face-down Den Protector. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to press your objective, and your objective is create a threat that your opponent can't deal with. And the only way for you to create a threat they can't deal with is it's probably not going to be a creature, as they have a deck full of Ultimate Prices and Crux of Fates and Downfall works there. But a lot of times a Xenagos or a Nissa, if you can resolve that in a well-timed scenario and they don't have a downfall, they're going to have to immediately fire a dig through time and try to find one, or they're going to be way behind and under too much pressure. So sometimes the small objective can just be to get something in play around possible removal. Or it could be, what are they trying to do? One of the best reasons, I have a very good I actually don't know that I've ever lost the Esper Dragon's Mirror, because it's very easy to tell, at least for me, that matchup plays exactly into what I like to do in Magic, which is figure out what my opponent has and play my cards in such a way that it doesn't match up well with the cards in my opponent's hand. And what you can do a lot of times in that matchup is you'll catch them looking at their graveyard, and so then you're like, okay, well now they have a dig, and then it's like, okay, well they've already cast this and this. They wouldn't have cast it in this order if they had something else. Like for example, I talked a little bit about the game against PV in the finals of the TCG player. On my turn 3, he disdainful stroked my Xenagos when I tapped out for it. So on turn 4, I morphed a Den Protector because I only have the only creature that he would kill on his turn as a morph is Den Protector, and I have Raptors. I have 3 Raptors, 4 Mystics, and only 1 Den Protector. So it's extremely unlikely that he's going to fire a Bioblade on his turn on my face down creature. And then on my turn 5, I unmorphed the Den Protector, got back the Xenagos, and jammed it because if he would have had a Slumgar Scorn on turn 2 and no dragon, he would have used the Slumgar Scorn instead of the Disdainful Stroke on the Xenagos. And if he has a Slumgar Scorn and a dragon, then I want him to counter the Xenagos as opposed to the Genesis Hydra or the Atarka or whatever I had in my hand. Or the Nissa. I had a Nissa also. So it's just like through contextual clues, you can figure out exactly what your opponent's trying to do, and you can just press through small objectives. And as each small objective that you win makes them more reactive, and as they become more reactive, you can then start to accomplish larger objectives, which is obviously eventually killing them.
And do you find that it normally pieces together like that, where you're focusing mainly on the smaller objectives that are in front of you, and as those add up, they become the sum of a bigger objective of winning the game? Or are you thinking in big picture the whole time? I'm
thinking big picture the whole time. So I'm thinking like, this is what my end game is. What's that saying? A journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step, right? So you have to have the finish line in focus, or else you're just floundering. Like if you don't know what you're eventually trying to do, then it's very hard to play, because you're like, if there's a turn in a game of Magic, a limited Magic, where you don't realize how you can possibly win the game, you should stop playing and think for about 20 seconds and figure out if there is a way. Maybe it's a combination of 2 consecutive draw steps. Maybe they have to make a mistake. Maybe something. Because if you continue to play that turn out, once you've decided you don't know how to win the game, you're almost certainly going to lose the game.
Right, because you're not playing towards any specific objective now. You're just casting cards. And, we talked about that earlier in the show about, the idea of just sometimes, people sit down and they'll just play their Magic cards, right? It's like, well, this has, this does something. I have the mana for it. I'll do something, right? And that can be, sort of an early approach to Magic, but like what you're describing is a much more down the line approach where you're actually keeping it in your head consistently. What is my goal here for this game, and how do I actually reach it? Because that's where you see weird plays pop up, right? Unconventional things, like you said, attacking a whole bunch of creatures into a whole bunch of other creatures to try to push through for 4 damage or something, even if you're going to lose most of your board, because you know that you've got a Banefire in your deck, or maybe even in your hand or whatever. And that's where you start to see those things where people will make exceptions to the way that they play to try to earn the victory.
Yeah, it's funny. We actually did a 3-on-3 draft. Luis and I did at the last Pro Tour in Belgium, and we played one of the best games of Magic I've played in a long time. It was like this incredibly, and it didn't even matter. Like the draft had ended.
But this was like I was Esper and you were Bant.
Yeah.
In what format?
Dragons.
You guys went deep.
And the game ended up going. Really long, and like he cast Secure the Waste twice, and it just was one of those games where it's like, I wish that game had been covered, because it was definitely the entire time we were both like trying to push through exactly what we were trying to do. It was a great game. It was great. So
yeah, it really just came down to like every expensive spell we had in each of our decks, and I ended up like losing the game by like 2 points of damage or something to you having being 2 points of damage short when I had to attack you with everything. It was pretty insane.
Yeah, that's how this goes sometimes. One more question for you, Chris, before we let you go. Matt Carr wants to know if you have any particular tips or tricks that you use to pick up a new draft format when it's released. We focus a lot on that on the show. We do the set review shows where we go over every card in depth to try to get people an idea for, how the colors flesh out and what each card actually does. When a new set comes out for you, though, do you have any advice to share to our listeners for how you approach that?
Yeah, read the keywords. That's my first advice. So the best mentality to approach a new draft format, in my opinion, is to think about what the designers are trying to get you to do. And the designers put the cards in the set for a reason. If a card is weird and obscure and does something funny, it probably interacts well or interestingly with another card. If there's a key mechanic in a certain color combination and it's unique to those two colors, then there's probably some sort of archetype or deck built around it, or there's probably cards you can utilize to your advantage. And then you have to play the format and you have to try all of these different things. So you have to, I remember when Dragons came out, I was drafting, we did a lot of drafts in the Pro Tour house, and I drafted this blue-white deck that I thought was just like one for the ages. Like I had 2 Skywise Teachings, I had the Student, I had 3 Soul Summons, I had 2 Ojutai Summons. I had like 7 cards with Rebound. So I had this deck that just looked like a perfect blue-white theme deck. That just was great. I was like, man, I'm going to 3-0 this draft. I 0-3. I was like, okay, what did I learn from this? I was like, all right, well, I learned that this format is very fast, very aggressive, and you can't, it's not even necessarily that it's very fast. It's like you can't really afford to set everything up. Like, it's just not one of those formats. Like, they're just going to attack you every turn, and if you don't have anything in play, they'll be able to finish you quickly. So you can't really afford to spend your turn 4 casting a Skywise Teachings and then play your turn 5, play an Ojutai Summons. Even though it's a good card, it's a 2/2 on turn 5, and they've already played 3 guys and they're attacking you. And so I realized you have to be willing to take a look at what you do and realize, what does that say? And understandably, these are going to be small sample sizes at first, but you do get to read what the professionals are saying, and you do get to draft as much as you can in order to add to this breadth of knowledge. But I think the most important thing you can do is look at what the designers are trying to get you to do, and then try it out for yourself. Try all the different mechanics out, try the different color combinations out, and figure out which of them work well, which of those mechanics are powerful, which decks are winning, which decks are losing. Because sometimes your deck, you can draft a color combination, your deck always looks great, and you never win. And that's not very productive. So that's my first advice. My second advice.
Go ahead.
My second piece of advice is you need to try the niche cards that maybe don't look that great at first, and see why they're in there. Sometimes they're like, for example, Wings of Velas Veil. That card's pretty actively bad in Modern Masters Draft. But if you're a blue-green graph deck with multiple Cytoplast Rootkins, maybe that card's great because it just gives your guy +4/+4 in flying. You can punch through 8 damage. If you never thought about that card outside of context and you disregarded it immediately because you think it's not a very good card, you wouldn't realize that interaction. And the one time when you draft that deck and you need that card, you just don't have it because you just didn't realize that interaction. That's my second. One more thing you want to do is you definitely want to look for multiple card interactions and color combination pairs that might be underdrafted. I've definitely done real well at the beginning of some draft formats, and I can't think of it off the top of my head. I'm trying to think of an example, but I don't have one, where people just don't necessarily realize all the different ways that the cards possibly can interact. So you can pick certain things up late, and maybe those things are exceptionally powerful, like maybe in Soul Artifact in the last M set.
Spider Spawning in Innistrad is a pretty good example of like a tier 1 deck that no one drafted for the first month.
Exactly. And you could just win. You could literally just draft it and win. I actually drafted multiple Burning Vengeance decks in that format and won multiple drafts with almost no creatures. I have a moto photo of a deck that I had that had only 6 creatures. It was 4 of the 3-mana 1/4 that mills you, 2 of the zombie lord that when a zombie hits you, it mills you for X.
Oh yeah.
And the rest of my deck was just mill cards and the flashback mill 3. I can't even remember what it's called. Dream Twist.
Yeah, that's it.
And I won the draft easily, and I put like 12 zombies into play on turn 5 or something. My opponent was just like, "What's happening?" And I'm just like, "All the things are happening."
Yep.
That format was great.
So, yeah, you got to try everything, and you got to love it, man. If you don't like to play limited, you're just not going to be very good at it. It's just all there is to it. I mean,
Yeah, the things we talk about on the show, on whether in this episode or others, there's so many of them, and it might seem overwhelming. But part of it is when you've got some, people like us who play so much limited. Every time we're making a decision or looking at a card in a pack or what have you, we are thinking about all these things, just not all actively. We've internalized so many of them that if I were to tell you everything I think of when I look at a pack, it would take a very long time. But if you play a lot of limited, you don't end up having to consciously use a ton of effort on doing that. So you end up getting the benefit of all these things because you practice so much that you don't have to pay attention to every single one actively, but it is happening.
Yeah, I like what you said, Chris, too, about looking for the clues that the designers have left you. That wasn't an approach that I had until I started talking more with my original co-host for the show, Ryan, who's a game designer as well.
Oh, he was giving you advanced knowledge. Okay.
He at the time did not work at Wizards,
but he does now.
But he does now. And John, my next co-host, was also a game designer. The next co-host, Brian, was a chemist, but has a lot of game design chops. And Luis, do you even have a day job? What do you do?
I mostly draft.
No, and of course, Luis is also a game designer. So, I've certainly grown accustomed to looking for those clues thanks to my co-hosts, but it isn't my natural inclination. I prefer, or I tend to just, look at a new set and kind of take it at face value and start to explore it myself. But much like if you watch a movie, right? When I go to watch a movie, I just try to space out on thinking and just get into the movie because I enjoy it more. But if I actually think about it and try to figure out who killed who or what happened or what's going to happen at the end, I usually have a pretty good idea of it. I think most people do when they put some effort into it. I just don't like that. But when it comes to Magic, it makes a lot of sense, to try to, pull back that curtain and look at what the moving parts are behind the scenes of the set, because that's going to give you valuable clues a lot earlier than you might think you'd get them about what the set's really trying to do.
Yeah, and sometimes you just look at a card and it just looks like, why is this card here? It's just a funny card, and you're like, well, it has to do something.
Yeah, I look for those a lot now. Those ones really stand out to me now, and it's not that they're always good. They might not even be good, but they're there for a reason. The R&D had the idea that this would help something along. The thing that really helped me learn that was, again, talking with people who are game designers and realizing that for us, we get a big set with 250 cards in it or whatever, and it's overwhelming because it hits us, most of it hits us at once. And it's just this wall of cards that we have to try to digest. And it's like, oh, there's so much going on here. But from a game designer's perspective, it's actually flipped significantly in the other direction, where they're always scrapping about we only have this many slots. What gets cut? And they're constantly having to cut cards that they really like, that they think fit, that meet the mold, but just don't quite replace something else. And so, from their perspective, every single slot in there, especially for limited, it serves a purpose. It serves a role. It checks a box, of something that they want to have in the set. And so, when you see something that looks just out of left field, you're just like, why would this be here? There is, in fact, a reason for it. And it can be a clue about an archetype. Now, you'll actually have to play it to know if it's going to be good. It doesn't mean the card's good. It just means that's a clue, to look down the path to see if there's something there that maybe isn't obvious.
Absolutely.
All right, man. Well, you got to get going. It's pretty late, I think, over on the East Coast. Luis and I are multiple time zones away from you. But I want to say thanks a lot, Chris, for taking the time to come and have a chat with us on the show. I thought it was great. And I really appreciate you sharing some of your knowledge with our listeners.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And I really enjoyed it. Yeah, it was a good time, man. Thanks a lot.
Yep. Where can people find you on social media? You know, if they want to say hi or say thanks or whatever on Twitter or wherever you're active on there. And also, where can they find your stuff? You know, I mentioned your articles a little while ago, and anything else you might be working on.
Yeah, basically, if you Google the word Gator Mage, it's all me.
The one and only, huh?
Yeah, Gator Mage on Twitter, GATORMAGE. So you can find me on Twitter. You can tweet at me. I will typically respond. I don't have that many followers, so I usually respond to everything on Twitter. Although when it's
you
controversial,
may have just mobilized
topics,
the army there, buddy.
when it's controversial topics, I may not weigh in. If I weigh in on a controversial topic, that means I feel very passionate about it. It's just my name on Facebook, although I'm unlikely to add you if I have no idea who you are. So you also can't find me unless you have a mutual friend with me, although if you listen to this show, you
so
probably
this was a good recommendation.
I'm unfindable and probably won't add you, but it's Chris Fennell on Facebook.
well, no. See, here's the thing. If you can find me, I'll probably add you. See, that's how it works. So you just look for me, and if you can't find me, then you're drawing dead.
This feels like a challenge.
And my articles are at www.plusevgames.com/Fenel, Fennell, and that'll just take you right to the archive. And
that's all limited specific stuff, right?
Yeah, it's very limited specific stuff. It's a lot about helping you improve your limited game. I would recommend reading them in order. Some of them are out of time in a sense, in that they have a lot of independent value, or they're anecdotal, in which case they don't have as much independent value, but they aren't reliant upon the others. A lot of the information does build, so it's kind of nice to read them all. Also, some are just better than others, and I haven't had many people read them and not like any of them. So I would suggest if you're going to read them, just like start at the beginning. There's only like 8 or 9 right now, and you're almost certain to learn something if you go check it out. So.
All right. Well, thanks again, Chris. Appreciate your time. This show, of course, is brought to you by channelfireball.com each and every week. Make sure you check out Channel Fireball for a whole lot of awesome free content, as well as a full selection of singles, sealed product, and everything else that you could possibly want magic-wise over at Channel Fireball. That is going to do it for us this week. If you want to find me on Twitter, I am Marshall_LR. Luis is LSV. You can also find more stuff related to the show on lrcast.com. That's got links for everything, including our Facebook page, our YouTube channel, our streams. Everything is on there. You can check out the latest shows go up on there. They also go up on Channel Fireball as well. Also a link to the Limited Resources subreddit, the LRcast subreddit, which is a great community of people to talk limited with. If you want to get some advice on a deck or just ask questions or partake in the conversation, you can find the link for that again on lrcast.com. All right, that's going to do it for this week. And we'll be back next week. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you then.
So with set reviews coming up in a couple weeks, or I guess, a little bit more than that, I wanted to get started with having Marshall review a few cards just to get back up, to speed.
Oh God, bro. Okay.
So Marshall, how would you review? Let's say 2 and a green for a 3/2.
2 and a green for a 3/2. I would say that passes the vanilla test, but not super impressively.
All right. What about 2 and a green for a 3/3? But it can only attack your opponent if they have forests, and if you have no forests, you have to bury it.
What? This is a card I'm much less interested in.
All right. Well, what if I were to interest you in 2 green for a 3/3, and you can pay 1 and a green to regenerate it?
Medium. I'd probably play that card sometimes, but sometimes not.
All right, because I'm just kind of speculating on some cards we might see here. What about 3 green for a 2/3? It has Trample and Rampage 2 and cannot be blocked by fewer than 3 creatures.
I don't know where you're going with this. I'm
just curious what you think about these cards. I just want you to review these cards.
I can't remember exactly what Rampage does.
Every time these creatures above 1 block this creature, it gets +2/+2. So this has to be blocked by 3 creatures, which means it's necessarily a 6/7 at the very least when it gets blocked. But it's 5 mana for a 2/3 trample.
And you can just not block it?
You could just not block it.
Yeah, no, I don't like this card very much either. I'd give it a D.
All right, well, what about 3 green, 4/4 trample, and it gets +4/+4 when there are no cards in your graveyard.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, I'd play that. That's like a B.
Yeah, this card's pretty good, right?
Yeah, it's great.
All right, last card. Honestly, I'm just curious, again, where you rate these cards. 4 green
I have no
for a
idea what's
7/7.
happening.
It's 4 green for a 7/7. During your upkeep, sacrifice a forest or bury this, and this deals 7 damage to you. If tap, it deals an amount of damage equal to its power to another target creature. It fights a creature. Just tap, fight. So it's 7 mana, 7/7 with tap, fight, but it eats a forest every turn.
Yeah, no, I'm in for that. Does it have trample?
It does not have trample.
Yeah, I'm still in. Whatever. I'd play that. I think that by the time you cast it, you don't care about your forest anymore, and it just straight up eats other creatures. That seems fine. Yeah, I'm in. C+.
All right. I was just curious because these are... I had you rate Guerrilla Warrior, Guerrilla Pack, Guerrilla Berserkers, Guerrilla Titan, Guerrilla Chieftain, and finally Gargantuan Gorilla. But
how did you pick all of those that I don't know? I don't know any of those cards.
I figured you would know because for those who didn't know, while we were in Las Vegas, Marshall got a gift, a pretty awesome gift.
I got an awesome gift.
Binder with every single ape and magic in it, foil and non-foil.
I have it sitting right here. It's unbelievable.
See, you should have used that binder to take a look.
You know what? What was the big one called?
Gargantuan Gorilla.
I'm gonna look that guy up after the show.
I actually left out a little bit of text because it's got some weird snow-covered forest clauses, but. You know, your card evaluation skills are sharp, and you were unbiased. I didn't want to give you the names, because if I give you the names, then you would have given
I would have just checked out. No, yeah, I would have just been all B pluses and A minuses. You know what I'm going to do, Luis? I'll take a couple of pictures of my monkey binder, and I'm going to put it on the LR blog. So I'll put that on lrcast.com after the show.
Awesome.